My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 31 years old, and last summer my 13-year-old niece unwrapped the brand new iPhone. I bought her, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Mom says if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." 30 people laughed. My mother stirred her drink. My father raised his beer, and I stood there smiling like an idiot while something inside me cracked. They thought it was a joke, but it was the moment I vanished from their lives. What they didn't know is I'd already started erasing them from mine. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by your own family. Because what happened next wasn't an accident. It was years of silence, of swallowing every insult, finally turning into something sharp. This isn't just about revenge, it's about taking my life back. I didn't always plan on disappearing. In fact, for most of my life, I was the one who stayed. The one who fixed things, paid things, made things better. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, my family would finally see me not just as a wallet with a pulse, but as a person. Growing up in the Cole household was like living inside a storm that never passed. My father, Frank, was the kind of man whose voice filled every room before he did. The smell of cheap beer and motor oil followed him home from his auto shop, even after it shut down for good. My mother, Carol, was quieter, but her silence had weight. When she wasn't praying over bills spread across the kitchen table, she was reminding us how much she'd sacrificed. I was 15 when I learned what that word really meant. One night, I came home from school to find Mom sitting in the dark, her hands trembling around a shut-off notice. "Electricity's gone by Friday," she said, her voice flat, as if she were reading someone else's obituary. Dad was outside, yelling at the TV in the garage, something about a bad call on a game he'd bet money on. I remember opening my wallet and finding 2 crumpled 20s, my entire paycheck from the grocery store. I placed them in her hand, and she looked at me like I just handed her oxygen. "Good boy," she whispered. "You're useful." That was the first time I saved the family, and the last time I felt proud of it. By 17, I was paying the gas bill. By 19, I was helping with rent. Every thank you came wrapped in another request. Frank would clap me on the back and say, "That's what men do, son. Take care of their own." But it never felt like taking care, it felt like drowning slowly, while everyone else stood on the shore, cheering. When I left for college, I thought I was escaping. I picked accounting because it made sense, because numbers were the only things in my life that behaved logically. I got scholarships, worked nights, ate ramen, sent money home every other week. The first time I called to say I might not afford rent, Mom sighed and said, "If you're struggling, imagine what it's like for us." That guilt, it's a disease. It grows quietly, feeding on your sense of duty. After graduation, I got a job at a mid-sized finance firm. Decent pay, good benefits. I signed my first lease, bought my first car. I thought this was at the beginning of my own life. But before I even unpacked, Dad called. "Hey, champ, I need a little favor." The favor was a mortgage cosign. "Just paperwork," he said, "the bank's being picky." What he didn't tell me was that his credit was already trashed from years of betting and unpaid taxes. By the time I realized it, my name was locked in ink next to his. And somehow, I became the one managing their entire household. Mortgage, utilities, car insurance. Even Maddie's credit card when she maxed it out for Chloe's school supplies. Maddie, my sister, 2 years older, single mom, professional victim. She could make herself cry faster than any actress I've ever seen. Every time she called, her voice came wrapped in urgency. "Ethan, please. Chloe needs this. You're her favorite uncle." Favorite. It's funny how people use that word when they want something. Still, there were moments, small, fleeting moments that made me forget. Like when Chloe was 8, and she drew a picture of me holding her hand under a rainbow. "You're the nicest person I know," she'd said. I hung that picture on my fridge for years. But somewhere between that drawing and her 13th birthday, something changed. I don't know if Maddie's bitterness seeped into her, or if she just grew up watching how the family treated me. Maybe both. Kids copy what they see. Sometimes I think back to those family dinners, the smell of overcooked pasta, the sound of the TV blaring from the next room, Dad's laughter echoing off the walls. He'd toast with his beer, say, "To family," and Mom would nod like she believed it. I'd sit there, quietly doing the math in my head, knowing that every toast, every laugh, every we're family. Cost me another bill. I remember one Thanksgiving in particular. Maddie showed up late, crying about how her car broke down. Dad rolled his eyes. Mom told her to sit. And before dessert even hit the table, all eyes turned to me. You've got good credit, don't you, Ethan? Dad said, carving the turkey like it was a business transaction. Yeah, but perfect. You can help her get a new one. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. That night, I drove home with mashed potatoes still in my stomach and the taste of resentment in my mouth. By the time I turned 30, my life wasn't mine anymore. I was financing 3 different lives under the illusion of family duty. My father's gambling debts, my mother's medications, my sister's impulsive spending. All roads led back to me. And still, when I called just to talk, to ask how everyone was doing, there was always a pause before the next request. Ethan, since you're already handling the mortgage. Ethan, could you add this subscription to your card? It's just easier. Ethan, Chloe needs braces. I always said yes, because saying no felt like cutting off oxygen to people I was raised to keep alive. But love isn't supposed to feel like suffocation. The night before Chloe's birthday party, I stayed up late at my kitchen table, wrapping her gift. A brand new iPhone 13. I'd worked extra hours for it. I wanted her to feel special, to know that even if her mom and grandparents didn't have much, her uncle cared. I charged it fully, installed her favorite apps, even put a note in the box that said, "Proud of you. Love, Uncle E." I didn't know that note would never be read. That morning, the sky was overcast, humid, heavy with summer heat. I drove to my parents' house with the air conditioning on full blast and this quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, today would be different. But when I pulled into the driveway, I saw the same things as always: Dad's half-empty beer cans on the porch, Mom yelling for someone to turn off the TV, Maddie scrolling her phone, and Chloe giggling in the corner. I walked in with the cake and the gift bag, pretending not to notice the tension that always sat in that house like smoke. What I didn't know then was that this day, this simple birthday party, would burn everything I'd ever built to ashes. When I stepped inside that house, the air felt thick, like all the years of unspoken resentment had been waiting for me at the door. The walls were the same faded beige I grew up staring at, but they seemed to lean closer now, heavy with judgment. Chloe's laughter echoed from the living room, a sound too light for what was about to happen. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something she called Carol's famous chili. It smelled like burned onions and nostalgia. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You made it, honey. I wasn't sure you would," she said, as if I'd ever missed a family event in my life. Dad was in his recliner, beer in one hand, remote in the other. "Look who decided to show up," he said without looking away from the TV. The man of the hour, or should I say, the man with the wallet. The laughter that followed wasn't just his. Maddie smirked from across the room, her nails painted a glossy red, the kind of red that screamed attention. "Don't start, Dad," I muttered, setting the cake down on the counter. He didn't. He just grinned. "What? I'm proud of my boy. Keeping this family afloat like always." Maddie leaned back on the couch, twirling her hair. "You mean the family bank account?" I forced a laugh. "That's what I always did. Laugh it off. Keep the peace. That's what good sons do." When it was time for Chloe to open her gifts, I sat beside her. She ripped through wrapping paper like she was in a contest, tossing aside clothes, perfume, shoes. Then she got to mine. The second she saw the Apple logo, her eyes went wide. "No way," she squealed, tearing off the plastic. The whole room leaned in. She held the phone up like a trophy. "It's perfect," she said. For 1 second, I felt something warm in my chest, a flicker of the old connection we used to have. And then she looked up at me, grinning. "Mom says if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." The room froze. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard her. Then Dad chuckled. That low, satisfied laugh I knew too well. "She's not wrong," he said, raising his beer. The laughter spread, a wave that crashed over me. Even Mom smiled. Maddie didn't laugh, she smirked, her eyes gleaming like she just won something invisible. My throat went dry. I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could do was nod. My hand was still on the gift bag, fingers gripping it so tight the paper crumpled. The sound of their laughter blended with the TV, the clinking of glasses, the buzz of the ceiling fan. All of it felt far away, like I was watching a movie about someone else. Thanks for the phone, Uncle E, Chloe said sweetly, already tapping the screen. Her attention was gone before her words even landed. I stood there for another moment, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then I smiled, because that's what I was trained to do. Smile, nod, pretend. I excused myself to the kitchen, leaned against the counter, and stared at the floor. My hands were shaking, but my mind was calm, eerily calm. The kind of calm you feel right before something breaks. The cake was sitting untouched, candles unlit. Mom's voice carried from the living room, cheerful as ever. Let's cut the cake. Something inside me snapped quietly, like a string pulled too tight for too long. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the banking app. My thumb hovered for a moment, just long enough to feel the weight of everything that had led to this. Then I started shutting things down, one by one. Mortgage auto pay off, credit card link removed, family phone plan terminated, Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, all gone. 2 taps each. That's all it took to make them vanish from my accounts, just as easily as they'd made me vanish from theirs. When I looked up, the room had gone blurry. The laughter was still there, but I wasn't. Not really. Later that night, when the party was over and the lights were dim, I walked through the hallway like a ghost. My footsteps didn't make a sound. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs, placed a black backpack against the wall, and walked out the door without saying goodbye. No one noticed. That should have hurt. It didn't. The next morning, I woke to the sound of fists pounding on my apartment door. I knew who it was before he spoke. Open up, Ethan. Dad's voice, loud and furious. You think you can just walk away? You think you can cut us off like that? I stayed silent. The pounding continued for another minute, then stopped. I heard his footsteps retreat, the slam of his car door. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. How could you do this to your own family? I didn't answer. An hour later, Maddie called. Then again, then again. 6 times in a row. Finally, a message came through. You think you're so clever? Fine. See how long you last without a family. I stared at the screen, then turned the phone over, face down. The silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. That night, I packed. Just essentials. Clothes, laptop, documents. And from the corner of my closet, I pulled out that same black backpack. I filled it not with clothes or money, but with proof. Years of receipts, bank statements, and screenshots. Every favor, every bill, every debt I'd paid. I slipped in a small USB drive with saved voicemails, Mom and Maddie gossiping, calling me soft, laughing about how Ethan always pays. When I zipped it shut, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like clarity. Then I walked out. I didn't leave town right away. I drove around aimlessly, past the glowing diner signs and gas stations, past the neighborhoods where every house looked happier than mine. Somewhere along the way, the sun began to rise. The sky turned pale gold, and I pulled over on a quiet road. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fix something. I just sat there, breathing. People talk about freedom like it's fireworks or applause. It's not. It's silence. Heavy, unfamiliar silence. I didn't know what would happen next, how far they'd go to drag me back. But for once, I didn't care. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't the end of their control. It was just the beginning of the storm that would tear everything apart. The first day after I cut them off was quiet too, quiet. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and waited for the guilt to hit. It didn't. What I felt instead was a strange kind of peace. The kind that comes right before a storm you know is heading straight for you. By noon, the storm arrived. It started with the pounding on my door again. Louder this time. I didn't need to check the peephole. Dad's voice bellowed through the wood. You think you can just erase us, Ethan? You think you're better than your own family? I didn't answer. The handle rattled once, twice, then stopped. A moment later came the sound of metal scraping. He was trying his old spare key. My stomach dropped. He wasn't supposed to have one. But then I remembered. Mom had begged for an extra for emergencies. The lock turned. I stood in the middle of the living room as the door swung open. Frank stumbled in, red-faced, reeking of beer and sweat. Mom was right behind him, hair frizzy, eyes wild. Get out, I said quietly. You can't talk to us like that. Mom snapped. We raised you. No, I said. You raised a paycheck. That made Dad laugh loud, ugly. You ungrateful little. He lunged forward, but stopped halfway, maybe realizing how ridiculous he looked. A 60-year-old man trying to intimidate the son who'd kept him afloat. Mom's voice broke between sobs. How could you do this to us, Ethan? Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Maddie can't pay her rent. Chloe's crying. None of that is my problem anymore. Don't say that, she whispered. Family is all we have. No, Mom, I said, stepping closer. Family is what you build together, not what you drain dry. Her tears stopped instantly, replaced by something colder. You'll regret this. Maybe. But I didn't feel it. They left eventually, slamming the door so hard it shook the frame. I stood there, breathing hard, the air thick with everything that had just been said. The next morning, I got an email from my landlord, Mrs. Green. Hey, Ethan, there's a bit of a scene outside. Your family's here, shouting your name. Should I call someone? I opened the blinds just enough to peek outside. There they were, Mom on the curb crying, Maddie pacing, Dad yelling into his phone. The neighbors were filming from their porches. I typed back, if they don't leave, call the police. And I meant it. That night, my phone filled with voicemails. Mom's voice came first, trembling, wounded. You're breaking our hearts. We didn't mean any of it. Please come home. Then Maddie's, sharp as a blade. You coward. You think this makes you strong? You're pathetic. I listened to them once, then deleted everything. The third day, they switched tactics. Maddie stormed into my office. I saw her through the glass wall, arguing with the receptionist. Her makeup was smudged, her hair tied in a messy bun. I need to talk to my brother, she shouted. Jenna, the receptionist, looked at me helplessly. I shook my head. Tell her I'm in a meeting. Mr. Patel, my boss, leaned out from his office, eyebrows raised. Is that your sister? Yeah, I said quietly. She doesn't take boundaries well. He hesitated. Do you need to step out? No, I said. She's not my emergency anymore. Maddie eventually got escorted out by security. The look she gave me through the glass could have set the building on fire. That night, Uncle Ron called. His voice was low, cautious. You okay, kid? I heard things are tense. I'm fine. He sighed. Frank's telling everyone you stole from them. Says you cleaned out their accounts and left them with nothing. I closed my eyes. He's lying. I know that. But they're spinning it fast. You should know. Thanks, Ron. Before hanging up, he added quietly. They're desperate. Ethan, desperate people do stupid things. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the hallway made my stomach tighten. I started keeping the lights on, just in case. On the fourth day, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, Mom's handwriting on the front. I almost threw it out, but curiosity won. Inside was a 3-page note. Your father's sick. The house is in danger. We have nothing left. Please come home. You're the only one who can fix this. Halfway through, I stopped reading. It was always the same script: crisis, guilt, demand. I tore the letter in half and dropped it in the trash. Still, that night I dreamed of the house. The flickering kitchen light, Mom crying over bills, Dad laughing at the game, Chloe's small hand drawing rainbows. It all felt so distant now, like memories from someone else's life. I woke up drenched in sweat. For a moment, I almost texted them. Almost. Then I remembered that laughter, 30 people laughing while I stood there alone. I wasn't going back. Not this time. But what I didn't know was that the next time I saw my father, it wouldn't be at home. It would be in public, surrounded by strangers. And he'd be holding the one thing he thought could destroy me, my black backpack. The fifth day, I came home from work to find a notice taped to my door. Are from property management, asking me to address the disturbance involving visiting family members. Below that, in red pen, someone had written, handle your people, Ethan. My people. The phrase stung. I hadn't felt like I had people in a long time. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I didn't answer, but a voicemail came through. It was Dad. His voice was lower now, calmer, too calm. Son, let's talk like men. Enough of this childish game. There's a baseball game this weekend our team's playing. Come meet me there. No yelling, no drama. Just talk. I stared at the message for a long time. My first instinct was to delete it, but something in his tone, something rehearsed, made me pause. It didn't sound like reconciliation. It sounded like a setup. Still, I said yes. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted proof that he hadn't changed. Before the game, I spent a night cleaning my apartment, not because I cared what it looked like, but because I needed the noise. The sound of drawers sliding. The hum of the vacuum. It kept my thoughts from crawling back to that living room. That laughter. Around midnight, I sat on the couch and opened the black backpack again. The papers were all their receipts, mortgage documents, screenshots of texts, every lie, every debt, every transaction that turned me from son to servant. At the bottom of the bag, under a stack of printed emails, was a small USB drive. I hesitated before taking it out. I hadn't listened to the recordings in months. I pressed play. Mom's voice crackled through the speaker, faint but clear. Ethan will pay. He always does. Maddie laughed in the background. He's basically my second credit card. The recording ended. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Something in me hardened. I wasn't going to the game to talk. I was going to end it. Saturday came. The sky was gray, the kind that threatened rain but never delivered. The stadium was packed, metal bleachers filled with people waving foam fingers and spilling beer. The roar of the crowd was so loud it swallowed my thoughts. I spotted him in section 12, row F. Dad. Sitting alone, ballowed in, my backpack resting on his lap. He saw me before I even reached him and waved, smiling too wide. Surprised you came, he shouted over the noise. Guess you're not as heartless as I thought. I sat down beside him, my eyes fixed on the backpack. Why do you have that? Oh, this? He patted it like it was a dog. Maddie found it. You really shouldn't leave evidence lying around. Evidence of what? He leaned closer, his breath sour with beer. Your lies, your little manipulations. You've been stealing from us for years. Using us. Acting like some martyr while hoarding money. I almost laughed. You're serious? You think you're so smart, he hissed. We know everything now. You'll be the one who looks bad when this comes out. I looked at him, really looked. The lines on his face weren't just age. They were arrogance carved deep over decades. Open it. Then, I said quietly. He blinked. What? Go on. Open it. Show me what you think you know. He hesitated, fingers twitching over the zipper. Don't play games, Ethan. I'm not, I said. But you are. And you've been losing since the day you taught me how. His jaw tightened. You ungrateful. Open it. I repeated. The crowd erupted as the home team scored. A wave of cheers shaking the bleachers. In the middle of all that noise, we were a small, silent battlefield. Finally, he yanked the zipper open. His eyes darted over the stacks of paper, confusion spreading fast. Mortgage statements, bank transfers, receipts, every dollar I'd spent saving them. What the hell is this? He muttered. The truth, I said. Every sin I ever paid for your mistakes. Every bill I covered while you laughed at me. You're bluffing. No, Dad, I said, standing slowly. You are. People around us began to notice. A man behind us whispered, Everything okay? Another pulled out his phone. Sensing a scene, I grabbed the stack of papers, held them high. You want the truth? I said loudly enough for the nearest rows to hear. Here it is. I carried this family while they called me nothing. Dad's face drained of color. Sit down, he hissed. Why? I said. So you can pretend again? I dropped the papers at his feet, and the wind caught them, scattering them down the stairs like white leaves. You raised a paycheck, not a son. He stood up suddenly, face twisted, fist trembling in the air. But he didn't swing. He couldn't. He just stood there, shaking, eyes wet with fury and humiliation. I turned away. Behind me, the crowd kept cheering, oblivious to the quiet collapse of a man who had built his pride on someone else's sacrifice. When I reached the exit, I didn't look back. But I heard him call after me, voice cracking. You'll come crawling back. You always do. I didn't answer. Outside, the sky finally broke, a thin drizzle cutting through the stadium lights. I stood in it for a moment, letting the rain wash the sweat and the years off me. Then I smiled cold, quiet, certain. That was the day I stopped being their provider and started being their consequence. The rain didn't stop that night. It came down harder as I walked back to my car, soaking through my jacket, blurring the city lights into streaks of white and gold. My shoes squelched with every step, but I didn't care. My body was trembling not from cold, but from the release. Years of humiliation, of yes, Mom, and sure, Dad, and whatever you need. Maddie all washed away with the storm. But the calm didn't last. When I got home, the hallway lights of my apartment building flickered. A wet footprint trailed down the corridor to my door. My stomach turned cold. I pushed the door open slowly. The first thing I noticed was the smell of beer and damp clothes. Then the sound of muffled crying. Mom was sitting on my couch. Maddie stood beside her, pacing, mascara running down her cheeks. And there, in my armchair, like he owned the place, was Dad. Jesus, I muttered. How did you even get in? Dad lifted the spare key with a smirk. You should really be more careful about who you trust. I stared at him, at all of them. My heart was pounding again, but not from fear. From anger. You broke into my apartment. Mom stood quickly, eyes wide. Ethan, please. We just need to talk. No, I said. You need money. Maddie snapped. You think you're some hero now? You humiliated Dad in front of everyone. He humiliated himself. By defending his family? She shouted. By lying, I said flatly. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Mom sank back onto the couch, her hands shaking. You've changed, she whispered. You're cruel now. I laughed, sharp and humorless. Cruel. I paid for this family's survival for a decade. I kept the lights on while Dad gambled. I paid your medical bills, Mom. I bought Chloe's school supplies. Maddie, you called that love when it was convenient. Now it's cruelty because I stopped. Dad stood. His face was flushed, the veins in his neck visible. You think you're better than us, boy? You think cutting off your own blood makes you free? Yes, I said simply. He took a step forward. I didn't move. Don't, I warned. But he kept coming, his hand curling into a fist. For a moment, I thought he'd actually hit me. Instead, his hand slammed against the wall beside my head, rattling the picture frame. His breath reeked of whiskey. You owe us, he growled. You wouldn't even have this life without us. I looked him dead in the eye. You're right. I wouldn't, because I spent half of it fixing what you broke. He hesitated. That flicker of fear crossed his face again, the same one from the stadium. Then, for the first time, he stepped back. Mom started crying louder, like a switch had been flipped. You can't just walk away from family, Ethan. What will people think? I don't care, I said. Let them think whatever story you tell them next. Maddie threw her hands up. Fine. You want us gone? Don't come crying to us when you're alone and miserable. I already am alone, I said. But at least now, it's by choice. She glared, then stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the lights flicker again. Mom followed, still sobbing, muttering something about how one day you'll understand. Dad stayed. His eyes darted around the room, landing on the black backpack sitting on the kitchen counter. You think you won, huh? He said quietly. That little stunt at the game people saw, sure. But stories fade. Son, people forget. I walked over, unzipped the bag, and pulled out the USB drive. Not this one, I said. This doesn't fade. He frowned. What's that? Insurance. I held it up between two fingers. Every receipt, every recording, every voicemail you ever left me. I made copies. If anything happens to me, this goes public. His jaw tightened. You wouldn't dare. I smiled, cold. You want to test that theory? We stared at each other, neither of us blinking. For once, I wasn't the one flinching. Then, slowly, he broke eye contact. His shoulders slumped. And for the first time in my life, my father looked small. You'll regret this, he muttered. The same words he'd said before. But this time, his voice cracked. No, I said softly. You will. He grabbed his coat and left without another word. The door slammed, and the echo hung in the air long after he was gone. I stood in the quiet, heart racing, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, just from the weight of what had finally ended. I sat down, staring at the scattered papers still spilling from the backpack, proof of everything I'd endured. The clock ticked softly. Rain tapped against the window. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis, the next phone call, the next guilt trip. Freedom, I realized, doesn't roar. It whispers. It sits beside you in the dark and says, you did it. You made it out. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let that silence fill me. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, probably more voicemails, maybe threats, maybe tears. But none of it mattered anymore. They couldn't touch me now. They'd taken everything they could, and I was still standing. The following week felt unreal. No shouting, no demands, no guilt tucked inside every, "Hey, how are you?" message. I woke up each morning to quiet sunlight spilling through the blinds instead of the buzzing of my phone. It was strange how peace could feel so foreign, like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. But peace doesn't mean it was over. 3 days after that night, Uncle Ron called again. His voice was hushed, uneasy. "Ethan, your folks are in bad shape. Frank got fired last week, blew up at his boss. Carol's been telling everyone you emptied their accounts." I sighed. "Let them talk." He hesitated. "They're saying you hacked them, that you stole their money. Do they have proof?" "No, just stories. But you might want to be careful. They're desperate." "I'm not worried," I said quietly. "Desperation's loud. Truth is patient." When I hung up, I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room, illuminating the black backpack beside me. I plugged in the USB drive and copied every file to a cloud account: statements, messages, recordings, all labeled, time-stamped, organized. Then I wrote one email, attached the folder, and scheduled it to send automatically if I didn't log in for 7 days. The subject line read, "If anything happens to me." That was my insurance policy. My revenge wasn't about punishment, it was about permanence. About never again being rewritten in their story as the villain. Later that evening, I took a walk through the city. The air was crisp, the streets still wet from the earlier rain. I passed a cafe where families laughed over dinner and couples clinked glasses. I watched them for a moment, not with envy, but with clarity. Love built on control isn't love, it's debt. A block away, I heard music. A man sat on the corner, playing guitar beneath a flickering streetlight. The melody was rough, a little off-key, but honest. I recognized him: Marcus, the street musician who played there most weekends. I dropped a 20 into his case. He smiled. "Rough day?" "Rough decade," I said, and he laughed softly. "Then you're still standing. That counts for something." I nodded. "Yeah, it does." As I walked away, I realized revenge wasn't a single act. It was the quiet decision to stop feeding the fire that burned you. And somewhere, in the ashes, I finally found room to breathe. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit like and subscribe. Because people don't talk enough about what it costs to keep pretending you're okay just to keep the peace. Sometimes walking away isn't cruelty, it's survival. And sometimes the quietest revenge is simply living well without the people who tried to break you. This story isn't over. I've still got an inbox full of messages from ghosts who once called themselves family, and one from someone I didn't expect. So stay tuned, because the next part might just change everything.